now. We're joined by India McTaggart and Janelle Aldred. Guys, morning to you both. Thanks very much for being with us. We're going to get started with the Telegraph. It's on the front of the Times as well. There's an image there, I think, of a federal agent firing what looks like a tear gas canister, wearing jeans on the streets of Minneapolis, and this in light of the fact that they have just shot dead another US citizen.
Yes, exactly. So these images, the Times and Telegraph have chosen the same one, quite a violent image. And, of course, as you say, it was just after the fatal shooting of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Pretty, who had no criminal record. And, quite frankly, the Trump administration are now trying to paint as a domestic terrorist, which is exactly the same as he did for Renee Good 3 weeks ago, when another Minneapolis resident was killed for protesting ICE. And I think we're looking on in the West completely horrified at these scenes. I mean, Trump seems to be building his own police state. And I think, you know, Tim Walz renewed his demands that the Trump administration end its immigration crackdown. And it's just quite Orwellian because they're trying to make you doubt the footage that we can see with our own eyes. They claim he was holding a gun and he's clearly holding a phone. It's absolutely absurd. And I think it's also important to note that Trump has increased ICE since the Biden administration. I think they had around 7,000 agents. Right. He's increased that number to 12,000 already. So, or by 12,000, sorry, already. So almost, it's just a completely ridiculous situation. And understandably, there's outrage and protesters on the streets.
And previously, those individuals would have months of training. I think now the training's down to about 30 days that they're getting them into the line and carrying these weapons. You know, what's your take on it?
I mean, effectively, ICE are policing that. You know, you've got to think, if you're here for immigration, for illegal immigrants, and you're actually shooting citizens of the country, then that means that you are well outside of your remit of what you are there to do. So legally, morally, ethically, I don't think there's a leg that anyone can stand on that could say, well, this is OK. And even the fact of, you know, this man's kind of up against the wall, he's down on his knees, he has a hand up in the air, and he's still shot dead. And I think there is kind of a danger. Watch it. It's almost like watching a bad movie because we're seeing so much of it. It almost doesn't feel real. And I think it was really interesting that his family have released a statement already saying we need the truth of our son out there. And also, it's really interesting that the government who are fighters for the rights to openly carry weapons. So even if he was openly carrying a weapon...
He had a licence for one.
He had a licence for one. And also, even if he did have a criminal record, that does not justify shooting him on the street 10 times. It doesn't kind of matter whether he was a criminal. ICE are not the law, and I think they're operating as the law, not even just above it, but as the enactors of it. And so the Democrat leaders in that state have actually asked for the National Guard to come and to be in high vis, which I think is a move to preempt what Donald Trump is trying to do with the insurrection. And to differentiate them
ICE officers
from people. And like you say, you know, police are meant to be trained in de-escalation. Citizens, we are not trained for these scenarios. Right. They are trained, but as you said, they're... So now we have untrained people, escalating scenarios, literally killing people in the street. The picture of that 5-year-old boy in Minneapolis this week with his little hat on, they're trying to entice his mother to leave the house so they can arrest her. I think you just kind of think, at what point... This is normally the point where the government should be stepping in to control things, and they are the ones giving them free licence to do this, and I think it is shocking.
And let's just take a look at the front page of the Sunday Times, as you say, a wider version of the same shot. Yes. But I imagine that had this shooting, the news of it, come out any earlier, there might be more coverage on the front pages. It's just photographs at this stage, but it was quite relatively late yesterday, wasn't it? But you hint at, Janelle, the kind of big divide between local authorities in Minneapolis and Minnesota, kind of up against the Trump administration. There's a growing divide and growing unrest as well. A lot of people out on the streets. And what was the temperature?
Minus 26 at the moment. People still out there.
Was saying.
And I saw that people were out there for the vigil as well for Alex Pretty, which is of course so wonderful to brave those temperatures. But as you say, there's a huge divide and there's enormous friction between the actual officers that are, you know, state licensed and then these ICE sort of untrained people who do not know how, as you say, to de-escalate. And I think what Janelle pointed out, which is so important, is that the family are trying to correct the record. And they did that with Renee Good as well. You know, they tried trying to paint her as a domestic terrorist, and must be, I mean, imagine losing a family member and then seeing them being painted by your own government as something that they are, I mean, the antithesis of. And we're seeing all this heartbreaking footage. As you said, the little boy with the hat, and there was another one of a DoorDash driver who was crying and hiding in the basement. I don't know if you saw that one. I mean, it's just, we're watching it over here in complete shock that this is happening in the States.
And it's also really shocking that the government are coming out straight away. There's no kind of, we're going to wait for an investigation to kind of see.
Well, they've actually stopped state officials from investigating. They blocked them from getting there to the scene to investigate. They had to try and get sort of like a warrant to go onto their own streets to investigate.
But Kristi Neum and Stephen Miller are coming straight out saying this was a domestic terrorist can't have the facts because it's so soon after the event. And so to see a government literally coming straight out on the offensive before any kind of investigation, before anything, before knowing who he is, knowing his criminal record, does he have a right to carry, but immediately calling him a domestic terrorist, it's just gaslighting of the most extreme nature.
Yeah, the Defence Secretary, or Secretary of War, as he's called now, Pete Hegseth, also putting a post on social media with a similar kind of message. Thank God for the patriots of ICE, he says. We have your back 100%.
Wow.
How does this go?
Let's move on, shall we, to domestic issues. And The Observer has their new style front pages have little text and a lot of picture. And this one has two men smiling at each other. And I quite enjoyed the headline, I must say, heated rivalry, which reflects it's a gay love story, isn't it?
That's
the ice hockey one.
Between ice
hockey one, exactly. So heated rivalry, anyway. I kind of like that touch. But it's quite a big story that Andy Burnham has chosen to throw his hat into the ring. He wants to be a candidate to run in the by-election in Greater Manchester that's coming up. How's it all going to shake down, do you think, Janelle?
Well, I think this is actually really, really interesting because there is not a lot of love here in this picture despite this. And I think Keir Starmer has a very tough, you know, the Mail says Starmer cornered, and I think he literally is cornered. If he blocks, he looks weak. If he blocks him, if he lets him in, he really opens the pathway to the architecture of a leadership rivalry, which will happen and include Wes Streeting, because it will actually open the pathway for, I think, Wes Streeting to be maybe a little bit more open about what's actually going on there. So I think Keir Starmer is in a bad position. I think one of Keir Starmer's, from my observations, leadership issues, and obviously I'm not in the party, so I'm looking in, is that he tries to run that party like a government department, rather than it needs to be a political animal that needs to lead something. And I think that's kind of where he's kind of fallen down, and I think he is going to come a cropper, because I do think that Andy Burnham will likely become an MP, and I do think that then...
You think he will win the seat?
If they let him run.
If they let him run.
If they let him run.
Do you think they'll let him run?
So it's going to the NEC. So it goes to the NEC, doesn't it? And I think that the chair of the NEC, Shabana Mahmood, who'll be on with Trevor later, who may well, some of the reporting suggests, if it were a tie of the votes on there, whether or not to let him run, would have the deciding votes. Fascinating which way she... Because, of course, she's perhaps got her own leadership ambitions as well. And I think you're right, Janelle. If they do seem to block him, then where does that leave them?
Yes, we know that the NEC loyalists to Keir may block him by saying that, introducing rules essentially saying only women and ethnic minorities can run. So that could be the caveat through which...
Because that has happened in some
states.
It happens quite regularly.
It has.
But the case they could make, I guess, is really expensive to have a mayoral election. Because obviously he'd have to give up...
and does it open the door to reform in the mayoral election? You know, they're on the march.
And that's the other factor. Reform are very keen to win that by-election, so there's no guarantee that the by-election would be won.
They just can't block him. I'm sorry. Like, if they block him, that Keir Starmer's popularity, which is quite... If they block him, this is going to be really bad, because they'll say he's running scared. They'll say he's running scared of a leadership bid and that he doesn't have control of his party. But they were saying that within the NEC, there's 40 people who vote, but there's a group of 10. And Keir Starmer is on that group of 10, as is Shabana Mahmood. So cue the Succession music. Brilliant. I think we're all kind of ready to get the popcorn out, because I think this is probably the political blockbuster at the end of January in this country. It's definitely one to watch. And I do like that music, so good idea.
Get that. Shabana Mahmood is on with Trevor later, so he's going to be putting all of this together. So you're going to enjoy that interview. All right, let's move on to this on the front of the Sun on Sunday. This time yesterday, Donald Trump hadn't said anything and hadn't apologised, had he? We didn't think he was going to. And
after his comments about NATO troops...
Apologise is not the right word. He's backtracked on his words. He didn't say sorry.
He's praised the troops. on a social media post, hasn't he? But he's not directly apologised for his comments that so insulted and offended many, many veterans and others.
Right, as you say, he called them, British troops, brave and great. But, you know, first of all, as you mentioned, didn't apologise. Second of all, had to say that US troops are still #1 in that. I mean, it was just classic Trumpian language.
And very quickly, because we don't have a huge amount of time, their line in The Sun is that it's down to concern from the King that has forced this.
The word is that through back channels it's been communicated to Trump that the King was very concerned over this language and over the upset that it understandably caused everyone, including veterans, including his own son, Prince Harry. And since that was communicated to Trump, we know how much the King can bend his ear on certain issues. We've seen that with Ukraine in the past, so made a difference.
He loves the royals, doesn't he?
Loves the royals.
I'm sure we'll revisit this next hour. Sorry to rush you this one, but we are out of time. But see you later, and we'll be back in a short while with the headlines.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?